Okay.
All right, let's call this meeting to order. Motion to approve the agenda.
I make the motion.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Consideration of regular minutes from June 13th and August 15th, 2017. Has everybody had a chance to review those?
Another more wing on this.
Let's stand for a motion, please.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from June the 13th, 2017 and August 15th, 2017.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Call for questions. Anybody got any questions? Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, public comment.
Well, I guess I'm your public, and I have an opinion.
Did you sign in outside and you got the little 3-minute timer, right?
Yeah, I do. Trust me. Scotty Gandy still owes me 2 minutes from the last time he let me talk. Everybody knows my opinion on this. I know this was put into effect years and years and years ago. It was never enforced. And to me, that is like implied consent by the city because they did not, I mean, years ago, things were not enforced. And that just pretty much makes the city complicit in all of these structures. And my only objection to anything, and I'll stand up and say it every time we have one of these meetings, I want a way for these people to keep what they have. If that means an inspection, somebody looks at it, if it's safe, leave it alone. If it's not safe, give them the opportunity, tell them what they need to do to make it safe. And the idea that they're going to keep certain things, they're going to have to pay a penalty, a yearly penalty or fine or whatever you want to call it, on something that frankly, folks, they're paying property tax on right now. Every structure in this town, so you're paying property tax on everything you have on your property. So find a way for people to keep what the city has allowed to come in. New construction, I agree. And by the way, that little paper that you put in the water bills this time, perfect. It's not 10,000 write that down. It was a compliment. It wasn't 10,000 lines of little bitty teeny tiny fine print that people just trashed. It was exactly a get your attention and here's what you got to do. That was perfect. But find a way for people to keep these structures. What they were allowed to build, let's make them safe, but let's don't make them pay a fine to keep stuff. Just fix it as best we can. And that's my opinion. That's my story, and I'm going to stick to it, folks, every time I get up here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, as there is no other public present, non-action items. Discussion of non-conforming structures or land uses.
I was just going to do a quick review over what we had discussed at the last meeting as far as the non-conforming structures and land use. We did put a notice of potential quorum in the newspaper for our commissioners to attend if they were able. But kind of refresh your memory, and also hopefully everybody, since you've had a month to think about it, I guess obtain some comments from you all, and also a direction. But if you remember, you know, this started back again in April by a simple discussion that was held at the City Commission meeting. There was no proposed changes made or introduced. It was just a question as to how you want us to deal with this, because this is just one of those nasty things that comes up every cycle, it seems, that what are we going to do about it, because nothing has been done in the past. But we did get some direction as far as talking about the potential for conditional use permits, as we presented to y'all at your last meeting on August 15th. So the issues that we identified was just there was really not a local permitting process or a formal permitting process prior to 2014. It was very haphazard, not done, and a lot of structures were approved by the state if they did receive a state building permit without even checking to see if they met our local zoning code. Also, there were structures that were built without a state building permit. We don't have any records on file prior to 2014. The only records, if the owner doesn't have that building permit, would exist with the State of New Mexico Construction Industries Division. And then also we have structures not meeting setbacks or the construction requirements such as the carports in Zone A. So we had discussed a conditional use permit, which essentially is allowing a non-conforming use of not just the type of use for a land, if they wanted to have potentially like a barber shop in a residential area, or if it's a carport or an accessory building, there would have to be fees. This would be a document that would be recorded at the courthouse, and then there was a proposal of just to recoup mailing costs and staff time, so much per square foot, just so we recoup our costs on that. It's reviewed and planned. I'm sorry, let me back up. This would be submitted, and then this body here would make the decision on whether or not to approve the conditional use permit. The city commission step would be used in the event that there was some need for an appeal on the decision. If this body turned it down, or in the unlikely event that neighbors don't like this, they could appeal that decision to the city commission. As far as guidelines for approval, much like our variances, this would, accessibility is not going to be impeded by pedestrians, vehicles, emergency services. There's no negative impacts from an economic condition. You're not creating excessive noise, just as an example, or no negative effects on adjoining properties. It's of adequate size and shape to accommodate the proposed use, and that vehicular needs, if you're opening up a business, we make sure that the roadway is capable of handling a projected increase in traffic. Other issues that we existed is that, the local permitting process, it works. People, we sent that flyer out just to remind people, if you're going to build something, check with us. That way we can make sure that, do you have to have that state building permit? We can work with you guys. And we can also avoid these issues in the future. As far as enforcement of the building permits, the issuance of a state building permit, the inspection for a state building permit, or the lack of a state building permit, that is the state of New Mexico's responsibility as staff's recommendation. We simply don't have the time and resources to track down every building permit back to the 70s. That would have to be the burden of the state in order to handle any type of enforcement action on that. We also, man, this mouse is fidgety. Construction materials in Zone A, of course. In Zone A, in particular a carport, it has to conform to the design materials to which the structure is attached. Carports have to be attached in Zone A. This is more of an aesthetic issue. Our recommendation was eliminate that. Let homeowners associations step up to the plate and dictate what they want in their neighborhood. That's one potential option. I don't know if that is the feeling of the board, but really I think that the majority of folks in our community would not object to that. So if you don't like the metal carport, you need to speak up and say something. But also setbacks, of course, we did discuss the necessity of setbacks, and really that's the one thing that has a lot of concern for staff is setbacks have to be adhered to. As far as the solutions, the permitting process is going to catch it early to make sure that it needs to conform. Also, if there's a pre-existing structure, if it's within that setback, it needs to be removed. And then we also recommended, of course, eliminate the conform to the structure which it's attached to.
But do they have to be attached?
I think that's more of another aesthetic issue.
I don't want it attached to my house.
I mean, one of the purposes of zoning is identify those setbacks for various safety reasons.
It's gotta be so.
But also, how do you want your community to look? That's one of back whenever this ordinance was enacted, I believe the attachment to structures was enacted in 1987. And at that time, whenever that code was changed, that was what the community wanted at that time. Of course, you didn't see, I don't know that metal carports back in the 80s, the prefab ones even existed. To be honest, I didn't look at the minutes that close to find out what was the motivating factor behind it. We can easily research that and report back, but I think it's more of an aesthetic
Did the
issue.
city commission pass this in 1987?
Correct. Yes, sir. As far as the conformance to attach it to
The building
buildings.
that was going on then?
Yes, sir.
There wasn't any building going on then.
Well,
There was nothing going on in 87.
right. And that's now as far as why that was chosen. I'm speculating.
Well,
It's mere
I don't
speculation.
know either, because I didn't even know about it.
So what is the definition of attached?
Exactly. Exactly. As I mean, it needs to be. You just don't attach it. It needs to look like it was built as part of the original structure. It's more than just 2 or 3 bolts and some screws.
Because I was asking that question
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah.
Can I just run a piece of string across a rope?
No, that's
attached.
not attached, I believe. And I can look that up, but it needs to basically blend to the
So
structure.
it needs to be clarified, maybe. Make
Yeah,
sure it's
because you can
clear.
attach something, there can be a totally different type of construction than brick or whatever.
I mean, even any word you use, you can use a join, you could use.
Conjoined?
Yeah, you're gonna get the same loopholes or whatever.
Right.
About HOAs, name 3
In Lovington.
in Lovington.
Well, no, that's just an option. I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying that most people don't even know that these
There's
things.
not.
There's not a homeowners association that I know of.
It's usually done
But in every subdivision
when the
that's
subdivision
ever
is
been
created.
created within the city of Lovington, there are, and this is not something, I want to stress this, this is not something that the city enforces. This is up to the homeowners or the homeowners association
Or the
or
covenants
the
on the deed.
owners are the covenants and restrictions. And those are in order to get those changed, it takes the owners of the actual property, but the city doesn't enforce
Right,
it.
I understand
And that's
that,
what we're
but-
saying with this.
But I
is
think
that-
you're using the wrong terminology, because there's not any homeowners associations here that I know of, but there are covenant restrictions in certain developments.
Yes,
I
sir.
agree with
And-
that.
And what HOAs,
That's on the
homeowners
deed.
associations, whatever mechanism is identified in those covenants and restrictions, that's what we're saying, that this is a potential option that doesn't need to be attached. Well, if everybody in the neighborhood wants it, then they need to, or if they don't want that, they need to follow the mechanisms and the process
Yeah.
outlined by the law to modify their covenants and
Right.
Yeah,
restrictions.
they need to be updated.
So,
Right.
but that is not something that the city enforces.
Well,
That is a civil issue.
yeah, and I guess my comment is, isn't the city supposed to act as a neutral body by which there's a uniform standard of construction or maintenance of the community, look of the community, aesthetic of the community? Is that our responsibility, or is it not our responsibility? I'm looking for guidance, not criticism. I'm not. Well,
No.
You can criticize me. That's okay too. That's because I don't know.
As I had said earlier, that is part of zoning, is how the look of and characteristic of the community. So, our option is that it seems like the overwhelming majority, and I'll be honest with you, the whole issue that has brought this about are the prefab carports that have been put up. And those do not conform in a Zone A environment because they don't match the construction style of the home, and they're not attached, conjoined, anything that you want to call it. But does it cause a safety issue? Not if it's anchored correctly. It's more of, this is one of those issues where I believe it is more of an aesthetic issue. So one option, and then it's the easy way out. I think it would make the majority of people happy is, does this body and does the city commission think that that's something that we need to enforce? do we need to enforce, well, do we really want, do we care if they attach? And the reason why I use the HOA term is that it's to stress that it's really up to the neighbors in that subdivision or those neighbors. Do you mind if you live next to somebody who has a metal carport?
Gosh, if they've been living there for 30 years, nobody's
Well,
complaining.
Would you mind if your neighbor put up a metal carport?
No,
Maybe.
I'm sorry.
I mean,
That's what it comes down to, and that's just
Right.
one potential
Well, I
solution.
mean, I guess what I'm thinking when you talk about like having a city zoning versus like homeowners, I feel that the city zoning would be the minimum. And then if the homeowners association in that neighborhood wants to kick it up a notch, where yes, the city will allow this, but in this neighborhood we won't allow it.
Okay.
Will that be okay?
Well, let me give you this scenario, because this whole issue was brought up because of the carport situation. So leave it alone, and then what that means is that we would either have to issue a conditional use permit for not complying with zoning, because the way that our zoning code right now is written, that in Zone A residential, you can't have these prefab metal carports. I mean, that is a solution. Do we allow these through a conditional use permit?
Right.
Or a variance, or, the thing with the conditional use permit is that it will stay with that property. If you sell it, the new owner will have to go through the same process to renew the permits. Variance is not so much. But that's why we're saying do we want to keep this uniform, set the minimum standard throughout the community? To be honest, we really don't have any active neighborhoods. Maybe one. We maybe have one neighborhood that's really set about wanting to enforce the restrictions on the property, on the development of your property.
Right.
But like I said, this was just a solution. But ultimately, it comes down to the recommendation of the majority of this board.
But could we change it where they don't have to conform or they don't have to be attached, as long as they meet all the other requirements of being anchored to the ground and setbacks are made and it looks fairly good. And I can't say even a brick one looks good.
Yeah,
some of them don't look bad.
Oh, well, Patrick meant to be here, and if we have a pressing question we can't answer, he's available by text, but he had an emergency come up. But so I'm a little leery with putting something that subjective, as long as it looks good.
No.
Because what looks good to you may not look good.
Looks good.
Yeah,
Look good to
that's
Wyatt.
all gonna be.
And that's
opinion.
very subjective. But
Conforms. If it's in there strong and stable, in the ground, concreted, and it's not gonna blow away or do any damage to anybody else's property.
I mean, you can change the code to conform with that, but now how do we deal, and of course, that was one of the two main points that we said. One, the structure does have to be safe.
Yes, I understand that.
And then also, meeting the setbacks. So I guess as far as what criteria will we utilize as far as determining, well, what constitutes safe anchoring?
Concrete
And how do
in
we
the
prove
ground.
it?
Yeah, but
How
deep?
much?
Yeah, and how would you be able to tell how
We go
deep
back
it
to
is
the
without digging
attachment
it up?
lingo.
You could take their word for it, They could tell you it was
But it's something that's been there, say 10 or 12 years already.
right. Yeah,
It ain't gonna
If
move.
it hadn't moved in 12 years,
It ain't gonna move.
Think the stuff we already have that's been here for, good God, I don't know how long, you ought to grandfather it in and try to go from that point on to improve stuff.
So
But
how do you,
if you're gonna try to make people tear stuff up, you're gonna open a big hornet's nest.
Honestly, Mr. Humphrey, I can tell you right now that it's none of staff's desire to tear anything down. we
Well,
want
but
to
that's
solve
what
this,
people
but
are thinking.
grandfathering it in. But it's just like, I got in trouble with my mom on weed tickets, okay? She got a warning citation because she had like 3 tall weeds in her alley. And me being the person I did, and I thought it sounded funnier in my head. I said, so, okay, you want me to, so we're gonna let you have 3? Is one, the next thing I know, 4 will be okay. When's enough? So after not eating for a couple of weeks of good home cooked mom food, but you know, at what point do we say, okay, well, everything, the issue with grandfathering is, you know, whenever you go to sell the property and stuff like that, you've got to have some type of paperwork documenting, so on and so forth. Are we going to let this go? But at what point do we say they're grandfathered in? What do we do about the individual who may be building this thing now? And I'm just playing the devil's advocate right now. But, you know, grandfathering in, then we got to prove, well, I built this 3 years ago. Granted, we have technology now to where we can prove that, you know, when it was built. But there does need to be some type of process. And now, granted, if that's what the commission says, that effective this date, if you got a carport that was built, you're fine. But there still has to be something legally recorded in order to prove that that structure was acceptable as is. And that's going to take money. Every time that you file something,
I think that's Patrick's problem.
that's not Patrick, that's who's
Well,
going to
I
pay
mean,
for it.
he's gonna have to word it to where it's legal. I mean, I'm not a lawyer.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that property records, something would have to be attached to that property record from here on out. And the mechanism that is utilized is recording it down there at the assessor's office. It costs $25 per document. So there's got to be some, what I'm saying is there has to be, is grandfathering the answer? Maybe is a use search permit the answer? Maybe there has to be some type of a mechanism or process in place that says that, yes, this was looked at, this does meet these criteria, it's grandfathered in, it's allowed, and then it has to be recorded so it's attached to that property. Because, and I know talking to David before, she's even said that, you know, people try to sell their house or they go out there and they assess it, and a lot of these structures may not be permitted, and that can cause problems later on down the road as far as trying to, you know, little title issues and stuff like that. We're just trying to identify a process to clean this mess up, so hopefully it doesn't come back again in 5 years.
I was sort of thinking along the lines of a one-time fee, penalty fee, or whatever you want to call it, because I'm thinking along the lines of what was said earlier about the city being complicit, and not necessarily, maybe that's not the right word, but if you don't enforce it for years, you sort of do indicate by lack of action that it is okay to do this. So what we've got here is this problem, but to continue penalizing someone year after year, to me doesn't seem correct. You know, if they're wrong, pay the $25, maybe $50 fee. One time, give them something that, okay, here's the deal. It's got to stick with your house. You sell your house, this goes with it, or the structure comes down, you're losing that value when you sell it, or whatever you do with it. If without this piece of paper given by the city, there's no duplicates of it, there's no copies of it, you gotta, you know, if you want this permit, this structure that is against our code, or was against our code, whatever, you've got to have this certificate with it, or you lose. Because I don't know, I just feel like, you know, the recurring penalty when some of these places is not the people's fault that have it, so they shouldn't lose their structure, and they shouldn't have to pay extra every year because they're not the ones that maybe built it, or even if they're the ones that built it.
There was no code.
There was no
Oh, no, there was a code.
There was code, just wasn't
There was a
enforced.
code.
Oh, it wasn't enforced. That's what it was. That's what.
Well,
It was there, but I mean,
just because something's not enforced doesn't mean it's not still the law.
Right.
no, right?
Yeah, but you gotta think back.
Just because you weren't caught speeding doesn't mean you weren't speeding.
But it's sitting in the same spot every day, day in, day out. There's only so many streets it could have been seen over the years, or should have been
17 or
seen.
18 years ago, you would ask the city manager, sorry, James, you'd ask the city manager and he'd give you permission, you go go do it. No permits, no not. So,
And that's the way it was.
yeah, that's the way it was. And I know several that got permission to get it done without a permit.
Did they get it in writing?
Of course not.
You don't get nothing from them, right?
I don't know, I learned a long time ago, you get everything in writing.
Yeah, if it's not in writing, it wasn't approved.
It was, yeah. But here's my question. Let me play devil's advocate, because James looked like he was having pretty good fun there. Mine is I want to build a house, and I want to build it like you did, and you violated the code, and now you all are discriminating against me. It's a discrimination. Because you were here before me, you get the special treatment, I don't.
So you should have moved here.
Yeah, that's a good thing. But here's the other
You're
thing.
not
Should have asked for permission before you built it. There's always that other, there's the flip side of the coin. So,
I was always taught as easier to ask for forgiveness.
it's making us have a heartburn right now, isn't it?
That seems to be the rule of thumb
Yeah.
since the 60s, since I've been here. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I'm just saying, we're talking about equity or equality or fairness. Well, the fairness would be, if you were doing this in the past, you've already said it, you've established it, this is what we're going to do in the future. We just give a variance for everything. And by the way, I decided I want to cover the car that's parked on the street, so I'm going to put a carport out there too. I mean, at what point do we stop? I mean, and I guess that my question is that, you know, we're talking about setting up a whole new set of rules to be violated. And it's one of those things is you give an inch, and then you give another inch, and another inch.
Using the old rules that you never enforced and saying from this point on, we're gonna start enforcing them.
It's not new rules.
It's not new
It's old
rules.
rules. That just were never.
But now we're
enforced.
back, okay, yes, but I agree.
Well, I mean, that's what you were asking. Where do we start?
Yeah. Well, when 1987, when we made the rules.
Well, you can't go backwards. I mean, you can, but.
Okay.
You can, but I agree.
I don't know, have you ever been,
You'll have
have
a
you ever been
closed
audited?
community.
They go back.
That's what started this. We started having this conversation. 2 years ago, there were some basic changes, in my opinion, minor changes made to some ordinances. And then a year ago, they, went through and did a review, gave a list to RVM mobile home park owners. These are the things that are out of compliance. And they did it again this January, February, just reminding people that, hey, we're 2 years out from the time that you have to be in compliance. And at the same time, code enforcement was going through and looking through Zone A, and they came up with, I can't even remember how many violations there were.
400.
And so we went in front of the commission saying, hey, you guys need to give us guidance. And so far, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned, they haven't given us guidance. They have not stepped up. You've given us suggestions. I mean, we've gotten it from staff, but the people that were voted in have not given us guidance.
And they were invited last night or notified of this meeting for this particular discussion, and not one of them seemed to have enough time to deal with it.
Personally, if it was me, we grandfather what we have and we make it a stipulation that it can't stay when it sells.
You can't, I'm sorry, what?
It can't stay when it sells. If it's a violation of the ordinance, it goes when you sell it.
We'll write that one down.
It's no different than when we look at what we were, with respect to the new zoning and the growth plan for Lovington. You look at where your infrastructure's at, and you decide where the best place for commercial and industrial type businesses are, and You know, when a city grows, you start making those changes to what can buy and sell there. You may be able to live in a certain area, and this happens all over the US. You may be able to live in a certain area right now, but when it sells commercial, or it sells industrial. And it follows that because that's where the growth pattern needs to go to separate from different parts of the community.
I don't know how
Do
that
those things.
That wouldn't work in the residential areas then.
No, because if you go in front of a banker and this house has a carport on it, they're gonna loan you the money for something with a carport on it. But dude, as soon as I buy it, I gotta take it down.
No, that's not what I said. It's gotta go down before it sells.
So
It's a
seller,
violation
the seller
now.
tears it down before he sells it.
Yeah.
So you're not going before a banker asking for money to be torn down.
So maybe, for time's sake, let me visit with the mayor, and perhaps we will just, let's schedule the actual work session to get them to come in, provide that direction, because I've heard 4 different concepts. The one that we discussed, but a one-time fee. Grandfather them all in, and then grandfather it,
With the copy
but with a big butt.
Yeah, well,
But,
it's,
no, I know.
and
No,
it is
but
a
tear it
very
down.
hard line. I'm just saying,
Right.
there's so many different variations of this that you could go through.
Yes, sir.
But we have a set of codes that have not been applied. And, you know, at the end of the day, the reason why we're still having this discussion is because we haven't been given direction on what we're supposed to do with respect to enforcing the ordinances. And that's all this is about. Keep bringing us variances. If we're gonna keep approving variances, then the school of thought there should be, let's change the code so they don't have to waste their time with the variance.
Yeah, paperwork.
You know, there's no reason to go through a process if everybody's going to get a variance. Let's change the code. All of these are gonna be an expense to somebody. If we change the codes, the expense to the city is huge. The amount of mailings that have to go out, everybody that's in a zone A has to get that mailing. You know, everybody has to be invited to the public hearing. And then they get another one, and so on and so forth. All of these things are expensive, either on one side or the other. None of us wrote these codes, but this is the hand that we're dealt.
Why haven't we had this work session? Didn't Randy request like about 2 months ago? Is there a particular?
We did. We brought it up at that meeting about having a work session, but honestly, looking at timing, there wasn't a good date and it was mainly staff just trying to get stuff together to put that. Discussed it with the mayor and visited with him about, you know, what Dave had submitted to us with the conditional permit, and he said, you know, let's have P&Z talk about it and let's get their feedback on that and then come back. And so in order to save time, it wasn't published as a work session, but still we reminded everybody that, hey, we're having this meeting and you can attend. But we can definitely set something else up, but to talk about what you said as far as the expense, regardless of what we do, in order to fix this problem, we're gonna have to expend the same amount of money regardless of whatever option. This is gonna require a change, a notation in code saying, even if if the final decision is grandfather everything in, we have to put that in ordinance. And that's gonna take, that's gonna take
Advertise it.
about $3,000 to $4,000 to fix the problem. So, but we'll definitely and honestly, we'll just make the next P&Z meeting. Just let everybody know that this is gonna be a joint meeting between the two, so we can
And
get direction.
We can all have our little deals made up of what we want. And then we can just cash it with them. Randy, you can start with yours.
No.
But if anything, I think, the past two meetings, we've had good dialogue with this. We've come up with what appears now to be, 4 to 5 different options that we can look at. Instead of just starting from square, or from the beginning and not have any idea, and this would actually enable us to guide a discussion in the right direction, instead of sitting around for 3 hours talking in circles.
We never do that.
Nobody ever does that.
More than 4 or 5 times.
My opinion is, we're not the ones that are voted into this. We're not the ones that have to answer. I mean, every decision that we make goes in front of the commission for their vote.
Yeah, they're the ones that's got to come up with it.
And they're the ones that need to answer to the constituents, and we can come up with a game plan.
Right. Well, and I
Well,
agree.
we did come up with a game
Yeah.
plan 3 years ago.
Now, I agree, but I think we also need to provide them some options to consider. Let's get a lot of the legwork done. Let's come up with some potential viable options to address this situation. And then they make that final, they have the final say. They may say, okay, we want you to focus on the grandfather clause. And then boom, we go from there, we pass out a recommendation and we can go. But I think in order, the preamble to this is that we present them with a couple of different options instead of, well, what are we gonna do? I think it's a more efficient use of our time.
So the downside to safety, when we look at it from a safety standpoint, and who's qualified to do that inspection? There's so many aspects to safety, and once the city has turned around and signed off and said, no, that looks like a safe deal, that looks like a safe structure, you can leave it up. Now, it was non-conforming, but it looks like a safe structure, so we're gonna leave it up. If something happens to that, who becomes culpable for that?
Exactly.
There's way too much risk involved in some of the easy solutions to the city, in my opinion.
Cost a lot more than $3,000 or $4,000 to fix that problem.
Yes, yeah. Okay. All right, so moving on.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, we have tabled this item at our last meeting so that we could evaluate the intersection further, but this is the new intersection, I guess, since Avenue K the construction of that road has been complete. And we're really hoping that things start building out there. But to address that intersection that hasn't had any type of signalization before, they are suggesting that a stop sign be placed on this particular corner of Avenue K, so what that would be the southwest corner for traffic that's heading east, and then also traffic coming from the south on Avenue K. With the appropriate warnings on the signs, there is a example of those signs in the packet. Traffic from the left doesn't stop, traffic from the right doesn't stop. Just because the configuration of that intersection, it doesn't allow for a three-way stop.
Yeah.
So I know that Crystal looked at this. She worked with Wyatt. She also worked with the chief. But even with traffic data that we found, we don't have traffic counts, but there hasn't been any collisions in the area in the past 3 years. But that road didn't exist prior to then. But that is staff's recommendation as far as how to handle traffic control.
Will these little traffic deals here be on both sides of the sign or just on one side?
Just on one side.
Just needs to be on one side.
One side is facing the vehicle.
Just
Stop
facing
moving.
the vehicle, that's all you need.
Are those the only types of signage, like that, the small sign, is that the only way to do that? Add the additional little thing there?
Yes, sir.
That's the appropriate way to do it in accordance with manual uniform traffic control devices.
Well, and then you're not waiting for a three-way stop. Some people will get up there and they would be thinking that there was a three-way because they're stopping and the other people are stopping. this gives you enough information to know.
I would stand for a motion. Then we can have whatever other comments we need.
I'll make the motion that we, well, let's see how the best way to say that. There it is. To approve stop signs on Avenue K and the eastbound 13th and 13th Street northbound at Avenue K, as shown in your review.
I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Any other questions? What? David?
No.
Brenda? What?
No, sir.
Everybody over there? Y'all good?
I'm good.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. I changed it up that time. Motion carries. Next item, Mr. Williams.
All right, so our next item, Abel Cabello has asked the city to vacate a portion of the undeveloped section of East Adams at the intersection of Eddy and East Street. This is just a Google Earth image. However, I'll pull this up on the exhibit he provided for the vacation. He's, of course, he is the owner of all of the lots on this side, which I believe that's, what are those lots? Lots 6, 5, and 4, basically all the way down to the next street. He's also the owner of the lots on the northern side, which starts with lot 1, 2. I believe there's 3, and then he also owns 5. As far as the lots on this particular side, these were previously vacated. Crystal researched that back in the 50s. He did submit this request some time ago, I believe when Meredith was working for us. However, it was we were still waiting on provided paperwork for this. Here, you can view it on that. So, staff recommendation is, and why I can elaborate on this, is that there are no plans, especially since Adams Street is no longer platted as a through street. But our recommendation is we vacate all but the alley, the 20-foot alley easement, and that is because there's utilities in there. It did appear on the EMAP software that he had built structures that encroached on the easement, but I actually went out there today and actually looking at it, the apparent easement, he has a couple of trucks parked on it. But we have, staff are recommending just the vacation of the street with the exception of that 20-foot north to south alley easement. There's no planned use for that particular property.
What about selling that property too?
That's what I was going to say.
Instead of just giving city property, because if you're just giving city property, I could use some.
Yeah, me
Add some to my place.
Honestly, that's a very
Oh, you
good.
do?
That's a very good recommendation.
That's what I would prefer, that if he wants it, to purchase it instead of giving it away.
Because if you give it to him, every time
Everybody
Dick
else
and
is
Harry
wrong.
that's got vacant city
Well,
property next to them.
yes, sir. Well, in this particular case, this roadway was platted as public right-of-way. And typically, if the city has no intentions of developing that roadway, the practice has been is that you can request to vacate that road. And
No,
typically,
you're just talking about the alley part.
No.
no,
No.
we're talking about this portion here.
It's actually deemed
It's
as a.
actually a
It's
road.
80 by,
But the practice has
You're
also.
60.
been-
Well, I'm still trying to get
it's 80
view
by.
here, and I don't know what you're talking about.
It's,
Okay.
That's what you're
see where
saying.
this ad is?
But just make him pay a one-time $20 penalty fee.
Oh, market value.
That's what
Market
he's
value.
requesting. That's supposed to be Adams. That's built.
okay.
But typically what happens is if you vacate, and what has been the practice is if you vacate the roadway, it becomes, it's basically split. So if he owned this side, half of it would go to him. If somebody else owned it, the other half would go to them as well. Because,
But he owns both sides, right?
So we understand why a vacate works the way that it works. In theory, when you purchase a piece of property, you're paying the price of that property. If there's been a infrastructure of any type put in, that cost of that infrastructure that fronts your your facility, your house, was in the cost of the purchase when it was done. At some point in time, somebody paid for that road to be paved and for that sewer to be built and everything else. When you buy, if you buy over there on Avenue K right now, when you buy that lot, trust me, the cost of that asphalt, that curb and gutter, and that sewer is built into that price of that lot. And then you're continually paying taxes, hold on, and then you're continually paying taxes on it.
Water and sewer actually in Washington Street facing on his, and then we actually have on 80th Street, we have a 4-inch main line also, we're 2-inch that runs down the front.
I'm trying to see.
Sure.
Are we done? So you're continually paying taxes on that, which keep that up. So that's what pays for any maintenance that the city does with respect to maintaining the sewer, the water, the streets, you name it. That's how that works. And so if a property, if a right-of-way, a public right-of-way, is determined to be of no longer of value to the city, and the city wants to get rid of that, when it's vacated, it goes half to the landowner on this side, half to the landowner on this side, or however it's split up. It's just split evenly based off of the frontage.
So the city does not own the property technically.
That, right now, the city does own the property. The city would give up the rights so that they would vacate it. It would become part of his tax rolls. It would become all of that. The vacate plat would be written in such a way that his new lot, lot 1, is redefined to the center line of the road. Lot 6 is redefined to the center line of the road, and the alley is deeded over to the city.
So is he wanting the alley as well? Because the drawing shows that he's got a base staked out, or a pad staked.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that is what his exhibit is indicating. If you actually go out there, the pad that is built is not built onto the alley. So the only thing that this would cost Mr. Cabello is modification. Of course, there's still more completion on this particular. This isn't the final vacation plat, but that would be, if this is recommended by this body and approved, as staff has recommended, he would have to amend this. We are saying no, do not give away that out.
Okay.
Well, you know, that brings up something that kind of is an issue for me. When things are brought to us that are not the final, like if it's not ready, why are we even seeing it? Because it's not ready. We're approving, basically, if we approve this, not really what we should be, we're not seeing what we should be seeing to approve or not approve.
In this particular case,
this is not the only issue, though.
No, in this particular case, this was honestly Crystal's predecessor dropped the ball on this. They were basically told, oh, there's no utilities, we shouldn't have any problem. It didn't go all the way through staff review. In this particular, I mean, he could have submitted his, you know, the vacation plat or the exhibit to incorporate. I mean, we could have modified it anyway at all. It's just going through the expense of having everything finalized is one of those things.
So if we were to approve it, we could put in the motion that we would approve it, but not the alleyway.
Correct.
We could stipulate it as such, and
correct.
So then we could rectify
Well,
that.
and this particular case is not the only one that this has happened where, well, you know, I've asked all of the neighbors to, you know, make sure this is okay, but they haven't got back to me yet, so we're still wanting to approve this, or we're still wanting to push this through, and I feel like that's totally inappropriate to bring to us something like that. So that, and this is probably the wrong time for me to bring that up, but anyways.
Actually, I think it's a very fair statement. In this case, and I don't know how we want to approach it as a committee, but you know, if we feel as a committee that we want to see final documents here before before we give a final approval. We could give a conditional
Mhm.
based on final documents coming back to us, okay? So we can review those to ensure that they have the changes that we want in there. In this case, you know, I kind of, he had to engage Mr. Fierro to do a certain amount of work on this just to get it to this point. And so to go the full step, to write the full vacation plat, write all the descriptions and all the signature blocks, because it takes a significant amount of signatures as well, and get everything ready for filing. You know, if we're gonna turn around and say no, then, you know, he's invested whatever dollar amount Mr. Fierro is charging to do that. And so this gives us something to kind of look at, you know, where do we call, where do we make the decision on how much they should spend before we give a conditional approval or something like that?
Well, not necessarily the spending, but just having the final documents, or the final exact specifications, or
Have before us what you want us to approve, the way it's supposed to, that you want it to be
Right.
approved.
Which in this case would require Mr. Fierro to go through and redefine each lot, or the breakaway, what it's gonna take, and then redefine the lots and everything else that, like it would be filed at the courthouse.
shouldn't have done that in the first place.
If I may,
Yes,
this
sir.
is the first time that somebody's ever requested a vacation and had this much work done. We have never, he's actually gone ahead because this takes money to do. And one of the things that we have done in the past when we've had vacations is somebody has said, hey, we would like you to vacate this street from this area to this area. And what we do is if it's recommended, we recommend that it's approved. However, you do have to have the survey and all the replating done before it's done. He's actually gone a step ahead, I will have to say, in this particular case. So not to diminish what you said about having not everything done, and this is a little bit different case because he's actually already invested money in doing this. As far as having a final plat, I mean, let's just say, would you want to spend $1,000 on the chance that we're not going to approve this?
He's already put Caliche down on this, so he's already invested before, he put the cart before the horse.
I know. No, and I agree. He did something wrong, and we
Yes, he
stopped
did.
it.
So
We stopped it.
Maybe the continuing, whatever,
Yeah.
but maybe the continuing with even getting Fierro was like, man, I've got a lot of money in Caliche and time and backhoes and crushers and staking this out. Maybe I ought to go ahead and make it a little more official before I come to these people asking for free land.
Well, but we're not dealing with intent.
No, I'm just saying, but anyway.
Yeah, but you have a valid point.
But I see that,
I would like
yes,
to
he
see
did
the
go a
final.
little above, a little farther out there, but
Mhm.
by putting a pad on it in advance was kind of going on out there too.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Is there, can we request that he purchase the property instead of getting a variance?
A vacation.
Or, yeah, vacation. I'm just got back from vacation, so my brain's out.
Well, I know that as the chair had mentioned earlier, you know, he's basically been paying the taxes on that road because it is considered, you know, that frontage is considered part of that property. Let me get a legal opinion.
Yeah, I don't,
Do only his taxes go toward that?
Yeah, why would he pay taxes on that if it's not needed to?
It's just like on my particular property, the way my deed reads, I own half of Jefferson.
Yeah, I don't have.
But I have right of way, it's dedicated right of way, so I'm actually paying taxes on Jefferson.
Well, he's also paying taxes on 80th Street too.
Yes, sir.
So, you
So
know,
we're gonna give him
are we
any-
gonna give him 80th Street too?
No,
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't
because
think.
that's, no, Eddie Street's actually developed.
But if
Well, I
Eddie
know,
Street
but I
wasn't
just
paved
said
and
that.
he wanted it paved, he would have had to pay to have it paved, right? So, you know,
typically, if you're in front of a road that, isn't paved, isn't brought up to a certain standard, everybody on that road would agree that they're gonna pay for that, and that would be done in what we call a paving district. you know, the cost of that paving, the engineering, the construction, all of it would be paid out over 7 years on their taxes. So in this case, you know, the roads, we all pay a certain amount of taxes, from gasoline tax to, you know, property taxes, whatever it is. Some of that money comes back to the city in such a way that the intent is to maintain the infrastructure. What I'm saying is that at the time those blocks were built, the cost of all of that infrastructure was built in to the cost of that lot. And so, and yes, he pays a certain amount, just like the rest of us do, that our roads are maintained to the level and capacity of the city taxes that we have.
It doesn't bother me to let him have, if he owns both properties on both sides, it doesn't bother me for him to have the easement.
Use of it.
You know, because having gone through this with my property, I understand exactly what you're talking about, so, so from that standpoint, I don't have, because he owns both properties, so he owns both sides of the easement. I just don't agree with the alley.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
and the alley would be out of the question
Yeah.
because that would keep him from having that. But the other thing is, I've never seen a vacation done that has, the property is purchased. I've never seen that. I haven't seen everything in this world either, so I'm not saying, I just know that since I've been on this board, all the vacations have been done by writing that asset over to the landowner. Don't know if you can legally turn around and sell that. In theory, you know, they could do, if that worked, they could do an unsolicited bid for that property, and the city would then have to turn around and advertise and get everybody else in the world to testify too. I don't know how you do that because it's not actually a lot at that time. In other
Correct.
words, it's not a defined piece
Right.
of property that can be bought and sold.
That's what I was actually going to say, is that we would wind up having to have that,
Subdivided.
re-subdivide, and so I think you're correct. I don't think we can turn around and actually sell it that way.
Does he own property to the east also?
No, sir, that is owned by part of the church, and I don't remember who owns the other adjacent lot.
Okay.
What was that, what used to be the Rebecca? Yeah.
So you could make a motion to approve this conditional upon seeing the final plat. And then reapproving the entire package before it goes to the commission. Or you could approve this or deny it completely. You can deny it too. But you could also approve it with the fact that the complete packet had to be completed before it was presented to commission. There's, from that standpoint, you can deny it until you see the whole thing. And whatever the will of the committee is.
You know, Ryan Berkey came in here and wanted a piece of land similar, probably in that same area, a couple of blocks over, maybe vacated, and we denied him. And I think it was just like a block or two over.
It was.
I don't remember why we denied that though. He was only going to be able to get half of it, if I remember correctly, because the other side was. I don't remember.
There was,
40 feet.
yeah, it was.
There was a reason why it got denied.
It was.
No, but I think it's like right here. I could be wrong, but it's.
I don't,
In the map you see.
yeah, I don't remember why though.
I'm not exactly sure.
But, and I kind of think that the reason we denied him is because the city still owns from street to street, even though the not parallel streets, but the other streets that the vacated area would connect should the city ever decide to build a road. It was toward the fairgrounds.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But this is different, because apparently half of this block is already vacated.
60
So it would
years
just be, could maybe build a cul-de-sac there if the city ever wanted to build a cul-de-sac. But there's no reason for the city to have that. Really, if there are no utilities or anything.
Other than just that alley. But there's nothing in that street.
I really think Ryan's thing only took a certain portion of a road for a certain distance and would have kept it from being a through street at that point in time. This is no longer a through street, yeah. So,
So is in the alley, is that blue area, is that fenced, or is that just the mark, just the?
Oh, we got a fence all the way across.
He's got the alley fenced.
That was fenced.
So where's the alley on that?
This, that's wrong, isn't
Excuse me, sorry,
it?
sir?
I said, if they're looking at this is wrong.
No, no, no. I think they're.
Well, then, so, but that is like a
He doesn't
carport
understand.
there.
Yes, he does. You
Hey,
understand
was the
Oh,
carport
clear
on
to-
the
It's right
easement?
behind it.
That's what I was asking about.
It's that area.
that.
No, I'm talking about the
I think
alleyway.
he owns this.
Just south of it.
He owns all of
I
that.
think it goes right here.
Yeah,
And then
but so he has
owns-
part of, but he does have part of his,
He does not, I don't believe.
if that
he owns-
carport's
I don't
on
believe he owns
the
this
alleyway,
lot.
then he's,
I think
Okay, well,
that's
this is
a
what I asked for.
right, that's what
James
David,
said
yeah,
he
he
said
said,
it was-
Oh,
it wasn't, it was just,
yeah.
So
he was
he's-
comparing
He
each-
said
This
the only
alley's
thing that was
fenced
on
off, right?
The alley was some trucks
no.
parked. You could see him.
Yeah, he's got a fence clear around it.
No, actually, I believe there's a gap.
Is
oh,
there?
I see it, yeah. Looking at it sideways, kind of, and it, well, his pad's really not that far over either. He's not onto the, I don't see a fence, do you see?
What's
a
the
fence?
zone in this area and is that pad?
It's
still-
in
Or a chain link fence?
Huh?
Oh, I was looking for a
It's
solid.
Oh, it is commercial.
It is commercial, so there's a zero setback on it.
Correct.
Mhm.
So he would be good building right next to the alleyway. So how do you feel about the fence that's going across it? Are you gonna make him take that down or?
That's one of the things that me and Crystal talked about as far as if needed to, if he actually did the same thing as what the developer did down on Madison and Monroe area, where they actually had to give up part of their, to put utilities, the same thing with development, if he did sell those lots, to connect the utilities from Washington over to Jefferson Street. Yes, it would need to be cleared out and vacated, so we could use it as an alleyway. But as far as right now, the only thing that's going through there is a fiber optic line. We have a 6-inch main water line, and I believe 6 or 8-inch sewer line that's on the north side of Washington Street. So as far as utilities going through there, there's means of tying in and heading north with them, but as far as right now, there is no need for it. But we do want to keep the alley open. for-
I know you want to keep the alley open, but what are you gonna do about the fence?
Looks like he's already
Oh, it already is.
acquired the whole alley.
That would be with the understanding that he might have to tear that portion of the fence out, right?
And that's one, why we do not want to give the portion of the alleyway in this vacation.
So one of the conditions of approving the vacate would be that you would have to remove the fence across the alleyway.
Oh, come on.
The recommendation.
So would it be wise for us to make a motion then along the lines of we want to see the finalized situation, final plans with showing that the intention of fencing and
I wouldn't.
or
If we don't give them the alley, you couldn't fence that. Or, I mean, honestly, our recommendation, I think it would be very comfortable. I'm trying to load up the street view of this.
well, you might be able to build a carport on it though, right?
No. No.
If If he attaches it,
If he attaches it to the fence.
There it goes. Right now, there is not a fence built across either the Washington side. There is fence built up to the alley. On both sides, there's not even a gate. And then on the opposite side, I actually drove up there.
Can you tell it?
There's where the fence starts.
There's a guy along mowing the lawn. Mowing the lawn.
Okay.
This is that alley on the Washington side.
that's a nice alley.
It's very nice. It's paved. Very fine bleaching. But, no, I mean, in your motion it says that, you know, we recommend vacation of East Adams with the exception of the 20-foot alley easement that runs north and south. If that's what y'all want to do.
Well, we could could we even put in our motion, and him seek final approval? We would give James and the building, not necessarily us, but just say they could approve the final drawings once he got it in.
Yes, we can.
And then that would streamline it for us, and also allow him to continue on doing what he's doing. And it puts all the burden on him, none on us.
Right. And at the end of the day, the commission still has to approve.
Right, and it's still the commission's deal, but we've done our part, due diligence.
Yes, we can do that.
Because I have confidence in our people.
Well, if that's the, what you just said.
I'm gonna have to write that
I like
down.
that with this other stuff here. We're removing the items that are encroaching on the alley, on the existing lots, 1 through 6.
And then I'll give final approval to, who would that be, which Crystal's office?
Yeah.
P&Z?
Staff.
Coordinator.
The staff, city staff,
So,
appropriate city staff. We don't want to burden you.
you can make the motion
So the
consistent.
alley will go from Washington all the way to Jefferson, right?
Right, from the south side of Washington to the north side of Jefferson.
Okay.
Or through lot 1. From lot 6 to lot 1. South side of lot 6 to the north side of lot 1. So would somebody like to make a motion?
I would, but I don't know how to say it.
Okay,
Which one is lot 6, which one is lot 1?
here. Right here. So lot 6 is down here. This is the existing right of way, right here. So actually it would be the north side of lot 6 and the south side of lot 1.
With the removal of the items encroaching all the way
Right.
from 4 to.
Right, the way the recommendation's written, approval of vacated portion of East Adams Avenue from Eddy Street, 140 foot east, on a condition of leaving the north-south running 20-foot alley for the city's future use in line with the existing alleys, and conveyor of field services must remove all encroaching items. I mean, you could just make
do
a
that,
motion
yeah.
for the recommendation.
Yeah, okay, I make a motion per the recommendation of approval of the vacated portion of East Adams Avenue from Eddy Street to 140 feet east on the condition of leaving north and south running alley 20 feet wide for the city's future use in line with the existing alleys, and Cabela Oil Field Services must remove items encroaching the existing alley between lots 1 through 6 and 7 through 12 of block 24 in the east addition.
I have a motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other questions?
Who's second?
Hello.
Hello. If there's not any other questions, then all in favor say aye.
All right. Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye. Aye for the, yeah, just so you have the all the votes. I didn't say aye, but I said all in favor.
So who was in favor?
So, well,
The,
I can tell you who wasn't, Betty and, so,
It's already voted on
huh?
it. I finally did hear back from Patrick, and he says, no, we can't.
Right.
State law says that when it's vacated, it goes to the adjacent property owners.
Okay. So, motion carries. Other comments? First thing, we are not required by this board, to my knowledge, the power that enables this board to act does not require us to follow Robert's rules. But one of the things about Robert's rules is that we make the motion and then we start the commentary. And so then it's all an active part of the motion. And so we really need to, in my opinion, and this is open for discussion, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But we really need to make the motion and the second, and then call the comments, and then have the commentary.
Okay.
If it dies if it dies because there's no ayes, then it dies, Or we can make the motion, just as much as you can make a motion to approve something, you can make a motion to deny something. And those things, it can either be seconded. If it dies for a lack of second, somebody can make another motion. If nobody makes another motion, then it automatically goes to the next board, which would be the city commission. But the commentary should be part of the motion. Should it occur after the motion, not before the motion. So, and if you listen to the city commission meetings before they start the topic, somebody brings the motion to consider it. And then that at least gets that going, and then they have a second motion, which is on whether or not they want to approve or deny it. We can go either way with that.
So all the commentaries while there's a motion on them.
Yeah, you have a motion and a second, and it could just be to consider the action item.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to consider the action item. There's a second. Everybody votes to say yes. We start the comment, and then somebody makes a motion to either accept or deny it.
Well, if I understand parliamentary procedure, once you have a motion and a second, then it's open for discussion. There's no
Right.
vote to discuss.
Right.
You just discuss,
Right.
and then you make the vote at the end of the discussion.
Right.
I'm okay with it.
So I'm fine with
Okay. Any other comments?
Do we need a motion?
Yes, sir.
For ease of staff and preparing the minutes, if we could have individuals be recognized by the chair instead of talking over each other. Because sometimes these meetings do get out of hand and it makes it very difficult to have an accurate reflection of the minutes made.
Was the last meeting on August the 15th?
that. We approved the 13th.
I thought the motion was to approve both.
We approved both at the same time.
Was the motion to, the original motion for the minutes was for both, right?
Yes,
That's what I
yes.
was-
You're the, you made the
Yes,
motion.
that's the way she
All
said it.
right.
Yeah. Okay. So with that,
Make sure we got it in there.
yes, sir. It's in there. So with that, motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
A second.
Motion in a second. Any comments, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So the next one is gonna be a workshop, James? Over. No,
Mine's an apple.
Do you all
Doesn't
download
hold my
that?
application or anything else.
Oh, the case?
Yeah.
Yeah, the case is spec.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, they just download an email.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I ain't got my test.
I printed mine